Hey, you guys, I'm back here with Justin Roethlingshoefer, and we're doing this limited series podcast on physical health. Try to help you get healthy in 2025. And so in the first episode, we talked about the importance of mindset. And now, Justin, I want to talk to you about nutrition. It's an uphill battle in our country to get healthy because of the nutritional challenges we face, and a lot of people aren't even aware of the nutritional challenges that they face. There are things that are undermining their health, therefore they have brain fog, they have different symptoms that are showing up that they do not understand. They were fine in their 20s, now they're in their 30s and they're having these weird symptoms in their 40s, and then hitting their 50s and they're tired all the time. And there's this, it's almost like a hidden enemy. It's becoming more known in our culture today. Mm-hmm. But talk to us about the food industry and that hidden battle that many people don't realize that they're fighting against.
It's such a great question. And I think the cool part you said, whether you intended to say it or not, but you said it's the hidden enemy. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that the nutritional battle that's going on in our country is actually a spiritual battle.
Yes, totally.
You think of where it comes from. It comes from agriculture. It comes from our soil. It comes from our plants. It comes from these living things. It comes from the meat we eat, which were living animals at one point. The fish in the sea, the cattle on the ground, the crops in the soils on the farms. These are all living things that God created. Yeah. And there's an attack against his living creations.
And they were good. Just like you said in the last episode, he created these things and they were good. They were filled with nutrients that our body needs.
Yep.
But
Exactly. And so you start to look at this, and I truly believe it is a spiritual battle that we are fighting, a spiritual battle that we are having to overcome. And I'll give you a little bit of a history component to kind of how we got here, because I think it's really important that people understand the history of how we got here to start to actually make sense of what we're experiencing in real time today.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you go back to 1909, and there was something called the Flexner Report that was signed by John D. Rockefeller. And John D. Rockefeller signed that with the implementation that anything that saw the body as a holistic ecosystem. Remember in the first episode we talked about mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. They're all integrated from a health standpoint. And so anything that saw the body as a holistic, integrated ecosystem was pseudoscience. Yeah. And that actually the body was just made up of a series of different parts that were assembled, just like a vehicle, that could be cut, taken off, repaired, replaced, without any type of consequence or
to the rest of the body.
To the rest of the body.
Yeah.
And at that same time, he made a very large donation to somebody by the name of Johns Hopkins, who Johns Hopkins Medical Center is now what we would consider today the gold standard in medical care. And Johns Hopkins made sure that that curriculum was what was setting the pace and setting the standard for the development of American medical care. You fast forward to 1945, and there was obviously World War II happened. There was a memorandum that came out that said all Americans need to eat more fish, more chicken, more vegetables, more fruit, and stay away from the processed foods, the sugars, and any types of wheats and corns, because those things could be packaged, could be kept well, and sent overseas for all the soldiers and all of the allies. If you look between 1945 and 1960, the average lifespan of an American increased by almost 9 years.
Wow.
And you look from 1960 to today, the average lifespan of American has increased 4.
Wow.
You start to sit into this and you start to think, my gosh, that's a real critical piece of information.
Yeah.
Now you go to 1960. 1960 was the creation of the pill, the birth control pill. Why are we talking about this when we're talking about nutrition? This was the first time ever that we were able to convince Americans that you could take a pill for a long period of time and have no type of consequence with any type of internal issues.
Wow.
It was the first chronically taken pill, long term. You go now fast forward to 1980. Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds, two people in the tobacco industry, tobacco, cigarettes. 1981, there was a Surgeon General who said, hey, we need to start putting that cigarettes and tobacco cause cancer. So these two entrepreneurs were like, hey, business is probably going to suffer.
Yep.
We're going to take all of our cash and we are going to purchase food companies. We're going to make food less expensive, which they think and can justify that they're doing something good for America.
Right.
We're going to make food more expensive, but we're going to involve it with chemicals that are processed that are going to make it more addictive. So if we can make it cheaper and more addictive, we're going to sell more. Yep. Just like we've done in the cigarette companies for the last 30 years. So we're going to do this, and then at the same time, we're going to market it as a weight loss tool. If you go back to 1970 and you look up how they marketed cigarettes and tobacco,
weight loss.
Weight loss.
Wow.
You go into 1980, calories, low calorie foods.
Oh yeah.
Weight loss.
Yeah, weight loss. Yeah.
And so they taught us to count calories, not look at ingredients. The second thing they did was they made a major donation to the U.S. government, the USDA, and they were the ones that ultimately had a major say and input in what built the American food pyramid. You start to look at the base of that food pyramid. What is it? It's all the processed breads, the cereals, the grains, and the products that they had just purchased, and that they had just processed, and they had just made, and they had just created. So now you fast forward to the year 2000, and 10 companies operate 95% of our food ecosystem. Wow. 10 different companies, 10 big food companies like Kellogg's and Kraft and Johnson & Johnson. They own 95% of anything that you see in a grocery store. Wow. And then you go even deeper, and all the studies that are starting to validate what we're putting into our body, putting into our system, are funded by the government or the pharmaceutical companies that then fund the schools and the institutions to put them on. And you start to see this ugly triangle of big food, big pharma, and educational institutions that we are supposed to trust because somebody has an MD or somebody has a credential next to their name that we have been taught to trust and just accept as truth. But we're running in this big house of cards, this bag of lies that continues to keep us ill, keep us sick, because illness is the fastest growing industry in America. It's the most profitable industry in America, because you can own the illness or you can own the food industry on the front end, and you can own the illness solution on the back end. And this is what we've started to run into when we think about our nutrition. And you start to look at any ingredients list. I just did this with Brandon this afternoon. I know I did this with you earlier today. We do this with all of our clients. But if you were to just step, and I encourage you guys listening to do this, go into your pantry, go into your fridge, and look at the top 10 things that you eat. I guarantee you, like, you grab an apple, sure. Like, we're not going to have an organic, unorganic debate on this. I'm like, I want to go even to a more basic level. Go look at the pasta that you have. Go look at the crackers that you eat. Go look in your fridge, go look in your pantry, see how many foods that you can find that you consume on a regular basis that have 4 ingredients or less.
Ooh, almost impossible. I mean, you did that with Brittany this morning, and I was watching, and she was laying out all these packagings of food that you said, show me the top 10 snacks the kids eat. And she laid out the 10 packagings, and you went through one at a time, good, bad, and she was just tossing them in the trash can.
And I think the coolest part about that whole exercise was, I still remember, Brandon pulled out a bag of nuts, and we looked at all the safflower.
And as a bag of nuts, anybody would have bought and go, oh yeah, this is healthy. I'm going to get some protein, some carbs, some healthy fat from these nuts.
And you went, you looked, and it had almonds, yes, it had cashews, yes, it had pistachios, yes, it had pecans, yes, it had great nuts in there. It didn't have any M&Ms, didn't have any chocolate, didn't have any. It was literally just a nut mix. And you went down and you looked, and every single nut had safflower oil, had highly processed oleic acid, had highly refined canola oil. Like, they were all laced in these. And then there were even some that had sugar mixed into that. And so you start to look at this, and it's like, my gosh, how confusing. This is something that is labeled as healthy for me, actually has all of these different hidden ingredients. And we go back to 1980, where all of a sudden if we could make sure that food was more addictive through processed sugars, refined seed oils, different things that our body continues to crave, continues to go through, that it needs it, all of a sudden we're going to consume more.
Those bag of nuts are addictive. But I love what you did. You also took the ingredient list, and then you looked up pistachios, almonds, all the different nuts that were in it, and then you compared. If we got those in just their raw, clean form, you compared the calorie count and the fat count versus the bag that had the oil-drenched nuts, and it was significantly different.
Yeah, it's about 50% greater. 50% greater. And so you start to understand that what we're actually ingesting is highly processed, highly refined, high degrees of chemicals all over our food that our body has no clue what to do with. And when we start to realize that we are simply a body made up of 30 trillion cells, and those cells need oxygen, water, nutrients, and the ability to remove toxins in order to function and thrive. Every single thing we put in our body goes down to the cellular level. Every single thing. That apple that you eat, it has to be broken down into the vitamin A, the vitamin C, the fibers that ultimately get absorbed into the cell that the body now uses for energy and fuel to be able to do what it is that we want to do.
So what happens when I eat a food and I look on it and I look at the ingredient list and there's metabolizine or whatever, you can't even pronounce it. And that goes into my body. God didn't create it. Man created this chemical. When that goes in my body, what happens?
So as you start to break it down, it obviously enters through the digestive system, and now it has to be filtered through the liver and the kidneys. And what we actually end up seeing is that there's a certain point, almost think about it like a cup. And if I have one faucet on, so let's go to, everyone talks about the glyphosates, right? The glyphosates that are sprayed over all the crops and all of the different fruits and vegetables that we're eating. And when you think about this, somebody's like, oh, the glyphosates. Well, I'm actually not so worried about the glyphosates in this exact moment. Because if all you were eating was fruits and vegetables that had glyphosates and we washed it really, really well, we put it into some baking soda and vinegar solution and got some of it off and then went to eat it, there'd be some glyphosates in there, but your body could handle it. It's like one faucet on a cup that you're like, oh yeah, there it is. Yep, put a new one, drink it, put a new one, drink it, put a new one, drink it, and we're fine. Like the water is slowly dripping into the cup. It'll process through. The body is equipped to deal with things that are not meant to be in the body. God didn't just say
it's a toxin that goes in the body, right?
Correct.
And then it's just flushed out. Does it get in the cell?
It will not get in the cell.
It will not get in the cell.
It will not get in the cell.
So it's just floating around in your bloodstream.
Correct.
Until it's flushed out.
And it'll be excreted through urine, it'll be excreted through defecation, it'll be excreted through sweat. It'll be filtered into different lymph nodes. If it gets the lymphatic system, which is active at night, kind of like a car wash for the brain, that does it. So like the body is built to flush toxins that are happening, both from a cellular level, from a neurotoxin level. It comes out through respiration, just through our breath. There's all of these things. Our body has toxins in it. Exercise creates toxicity. There's oxidative stress that happens at the cellular level. So something very good also creates a toxin. Like our body is this unique, complicated system of toxin creation and toxin elimination.
But it's the issue happens
when it's quantity.
When it's a lot of toxins coming in.
When it's quantity. And this is where you start to see people get really confused.
Because
all of a sudden you're eating things and you're putting, you've got poor quality water. Then you've got poor quality food that you're putting into your body. Then you're not actually sleeping really well at night. And then you're actually a little bit overweight, and thus you have more fat cells, and thus we have more fat cells. Your body's not getting the oxygen it needs, so it's not getting the oxygen it needs. That's creating more oxidative stress.
So your toxicity is just skyrocketing. Your body can't handle it.
You're stacking. You're stacking. Like even
so, if I'm eating processed foods for breakfast, I'm eating processed foods for lunch, and I'm eating processed foods for dinner, I'm multi-stacking chemicals into my body that my body's like, I can't handle this.
You're right, but I even want to take that a step further. I want to start to define processed foods for people, because I think when people think processed food, they're like, oh, I'm not eating Denny's for breakfast and then McDonald's for lunch and then pizza for dinner.
Yeah.
Like that's not my diet. Like I'm eating very clean.
Right.
They think they are.
Yeah. I thought I was until I met you.
and you go down this road, and first off, you go back to like my history of what I talked about in episode 1 of anorexia and OCD and really being just all consumed on what I'm eating nutritionally.
Yeah.
And you come back now full circle. Like, I'm very aware of this. Like, I don't want people to have a fear of food. I think food, I think we do that too often in this industry, is people demonize foods. Yeah. They demonize, oh, you shouldn't have ice cream. Ice cream is one of my favorite things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make sure the ice cream I'm eating is made of, that it has real sugar in it, that it has milk in it, that it is spun and made by a farmer somewhere, it's organic, and it's, if I'm getting strawberry, it's actual chunks of strawberry.
Yeah.
Like, that's what my ice cream's going to be. Yeah. Like, there's a place downtown Charleston that we went the other night with Elise. Yeah. I think it's called Off Track, so shout out to Off Track. But that's exactly how they made their ice cream. Yeah. And you taste the difference immediately. Wow. Immediately. And I'm somebody who, for the longest time, if you would ask me, I'd say I'm lactose intolerant. Yeah. Well, I'm actually able to eat certain things that are real dairy, not processed dairy, because it's not a lactose intolerance. It's an inability to break down the chemicals that they put in at a certain area.
I've said the same thing. And then when you were working with me on my food list, you reintroduced dairy into my life, and I'm like, ooh, I was scared. Yeah. I was scared. Yeah. But I've not had any issues.
And so, and even as we start getting into this, we can start to test you from a genetic standpoint. We can start to test you from a cellular standpoint. Start to get really specific as to, okay, what do you need? But from a generalization standpoint, your body is built to be able to break down foods when they are in their purest, most natural state.
Help people understand this, because this has been so helpful for me. People ask me every once in a while, Mac, what do you eat? Yeah. I say, well, here's the simple way to explain it. If God made it, I'll eat it. Yep. If man made it, I don't want to eat it. I don't want it in my body, because my body's not really sure how to handle it. If it's too much of it. But explain to the audience how there is some genetic predisposition versus demonizing. Oh, like I demonize dairy, I demonize bread, I demonize certain lectins. I was demonizing these certain things. And then you helped me see from a cellular perspective, oh, wait a minute, Mac, those things aren't all bad. Yeah. You do have some predisposition, genetic predisposition. Help us understand that, because that was freeing for me.
Yeah, so let's take gluten for an example.
Yes.
Because a lot of people demonize gluten, they demonize breads, they demonize all these things, because anytime I eat gluten, anytime I eat bread, I bloat and I feel like I'm retaining water everywhere. I don't feel well. I get brain fog, I get lethargic, et cetera.
That's my story. Yep. I've not had bread in over 10 years.
And when we start to take a look at you genetically, you likely have an MTHFR gene mutation. An MTHFR gene mutation basically states that you can't break down folate. And when you start to back up, if you have a genetic break where you can't actually start to methylate or break down a certain type of food, it becomes a toxin in your body and something that just gets stored up, and that your body has to now react in a certain way. So you'll react with bloating, you'll react with headaches, you'll react with maybe some type of behavioral disorder, skin irritations, these things, because the body has to try to expel it. And so when there's a symptom, I just say that's a language of our body saying, hey, something's not happening that we don't like. Yeah. So let's say you have the genetic mutation MTHFR, and you start to look at the majority of breads. We did this morning. Yep. There's something in breads called that's primarily an enriched wheat flour that's called folic acid. Folic acid, you have to methylate. And so if you don't have the gene to be able to methylate properly, MTHFR gene mutation, you're going to have a buildup of folic acid in your system that's going to start to create an irritation, an irritant. Wow. And so you aren't actually gluten intolerant.
Right, yeah.
You just have the gene mutation that doesn't allow you to break down a crap chemical called folic acid.
Yeah. I'm eating bread again for the first time in 10 years, and I'm loving it.
And so if we actually took you back to a higher quality bread that was, again, this is why there's been this massive rise in the sourdoughs, right?
Yes.
Because sourdough is just a starter, a little bit of water. Mm-hmm. Let her go and let it grow and let it bake and eat it, and your body knows what to do with it. Yeah. And so I go back to like Ecclesiastes 11, right? And the Lord says of like what we're supposed to eat, where like the types of meats we're supposed to have. If it has a split hoof and it chews its cud, it's good to go. If it doesn't, probably something that we should not be eating. So like with pork, it's why I stay away from pork, because it doesn't chew its cud, even though it has a split foot. But deer, elk, bison, cattle, you look at your chickens, everything of this nature from the bird standpoint. Then you go into the water. If it has fins and scales, something that should be eaten. If it's something that doesn't have that, stay away from it. So you start thinking about your shrimps, your clams, your crustaceans, your shellfish. A lot of people have these allergies. Right. But are they really allergies, or just we were never really meant to eat them because they're bottom dwellers, bottom feeders? And so you come back to like, hey, if God created it, if God allowed us to eat it, then I'm going to step in, and that's like, go for it. And you start, your mind becomes blown when you start to see what is actually available to you, the types of fruits, the types of vegetables, the types of grains, the types of proteins that you have access to. But the world taught us to count calories, not look at ingredients. And so I really challenge everybody to start looking at ingredients. And if there's something on there that has 4 or more, stay away. If there's something on there that you don't understand or you can't even pronounce, stay away. Because that is what you're putting into your body for fuel. You're asking your cells to break that down. And we're 30 trillion cells synergistically working together to holistically start to function and operate in a powerful way to carry out our God-given calling. And the only thing that our cells can operate on is off of what we give it.
Okay, this is so good. And there's a hidden enemy in our nation that is taking, just going to war against our bodies, against our health. But God made healthy food that can make us feel better. I mean, one of the things you had me do is for 5-6 weeks, you called it the single ingredient. All I could eat was a single ingredient. So it's like carrot, blueberry. Exactly. I could mix some of those together, but it had to be a single ingredient. And so I actually cut out like my protein powder, which had like 4 or 5 ingredients in it, and several other things that you had me cut out. And it was amazing in 3 to 4 days how different I felt just eating just that pure food, nothing out of a package. So give us rapid fire. What are some practical things that people can do to retake ground in the area of nutrition? You've given several things, but just rapid fire, several things that you would recommend.
I would look at getting, number one is your body weight in protein a day. Body weight in protein in grams a day. Like that is something just like, hey, rule of thumb, this is what I should be striving for. Number 2 is, again, I know I've said this and don't want to be a broken record, but 4 ingredients or less. Like 4 ingredients or less. Like strive for that. Like if there's more than 4 ingredients, hey, it's not for me. And start to like do an audit of what it is that you're taking in. Number 3, and this again goes into like how our body digests food, is like 3 hours before bed, let's stop eating. Let's have this, like, I call it the circadian rhythm fasting window.
That's made a huge difference for me too.
A lot of people call it intermittent fasting. Again, like the world does, it perverts a lot of what is been meant for good. Intermittent fasting is not new. What ended up happening with our ancestors is the sun would go down and it's like, hey, I guess it's time to go to bed. And then the sun would come up and I guess, hey, it's time to get up.
And then we found electricity.
And all of a sudden we've got these easier ways to cook food and make food and do all these things. And so we began to be able to eat at any time that we wanted. And so when we look at this and we start to actually stop eating 3 hours before we go to bed, we wake up and we start eating 3 hours after we wake up, meaning we get in our Bible reading time, we get our connection time, we get moving, we get some sunlight in our eyes, we get some water in. We look after the kids, you get some connection time. It's probably going to be somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. It's not the first thing that you're doing or the first thing that you're going for.
Your body needs 12 hours to digest, minimum, right? 12 hours to digest your food.
Yep.
And from what I understand, what I'm learning, is if you eat late, now you're going to sleep, but your body is still working to digest the food, and it's not supposed to be doing that while you sleep, right?
So not only, so what kind of happens, let me finish this thought and then I'll go back to that. So 3 hours before bed, you stop eating. 3 hours after bed, you wake up or you start eating. Now all of a sudden you think that you're sleeping for somewhere between 6 and 8 hours at night. You've naturally created a 12 to 14 hour fasting window.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah.
And now you're eating when you actually need the energy. When you need to be able to break it down, you need to be able to do what's necessary. Yeah. And so going back to your question, going back to the concept of what happens when you eat later into that point, well, what all of a sudden occurs is, yes, your body starts to break down the food, but when you're sleeping, you're in a parasympathetic state. So a rest and digest state, a quiet state, a relaxed state. So not only does the digestion start to slow down, so you don't digest that food as well, and because we have 400 times more melatonin produced by our gut than is produced by the pineal gland in our brain, we actually don't get into the deep stages of sleep that's necessary. And so because we don't get into the deep stages of sleep that's necessary, we actually go into a inability to remove toxins from our cells and from our body again. And because we get into this state, how many people have ever woken up and been like, oh my God, I'm starving.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I need food.
Yeah.
But yet you had a massive meal the night before.
Right.
And you didn't sleep very well. Your brain is triggering, going, hey Mac, you're starving because I actually don't have the sugars in my brain and the sugars at my cellular level that I need to be able to function properly. So I have a ghrelin release, call it the ghrelin gremlin, and that says, hey, you need to get food in right away. So now you get this trigger, and your brain knows how to get sugar. It knows what to tell you to crave.
Yeah.
So you're not going to wake up and crave a real good boiled egg and avocado.
Right.
Hey, I need some sugar fast, or I'm going to have something negatively happen. So let's go grab that cereal.
Yeah.
Let's go grab that bread with jam.
Yeah.
Let's go grab that banana.
Right.
And it's an immediate sugar spike, and it's an immediate insulin hit. And we start to see this cycle over and over and over and over again. And so we have to make sure that we're treating our body in a way that's going to allow it to thrive and allow things to actually happen in a way that's going to optimize things at the cellular level.
Yeah. So good. All right. Last question on nutrition. Where do you find food that has 4 ingredients or less? Can you give some tips, recommendation, real practical stuff there?
Yeah, so this is the easiest way that I've been able to dictate it without actually going into deep specifics. You go into a grocery store, walk the perimeter.
Yeah.
You walk in the grocery store, typically what are you going to find? Your fruits and vegetables.
Fruit and vegetables, yeah.
Go organic. Make sure when you bring them home, you're washing them in vinegar and baking soda to get off a lot of the different grime. You wash them in baking soda and vinegar, you're actually probably going to start to see microparticles float to the surface. You'll probably start to see an oily film.
Wow.
Make sure you're doing that with even organic and non-organic fruits and vegetables. So you walk in, you got your produce. Now you do a little curve around the top and you've got your meats and alternatives. So you've got your chickens, you've got your fish, you've got your beefs. Amazing, keep going. Then you come around and you've got probably your dairies. You've got your eggs, you've got your milks, you've got your yogurts, you've got your cottage cheeses, you've got all those little things. Then you come around to the backside and you've got the bakery. And the bakery, you're going to look for the bread.
Yeah.
So you're going to go for your bread and, hey, where can I find bread that is just a really good sourdough? It doesn't have enriched wheat flour, stays away from a lot of the folic acid and things that we just talked about.
Yeah.
But you do that lap, and I guarantee you're going to find foods that are 4 ingredients or less, that are not processed, that are simply in those raw states that you get to make. Because everything in the middle is where we get lost.
Yeah.
Everything in the middle is where we get tempted. Everything in the middle is where we go to enter into this processed food space.
Wow. These are some incredible tips that are going to help all of us improve our nutrition. And hey, I just want to give you a challenge. Try this for 5 days, 7 days, shop the perimeter of your grocery store. Get things that are 4 ingredients or less. Take that challenge for 7 days, and I guarantee you're going to feel different. You're probably going to look different, a greater glow on your skin and feel different. And once you start feeling different, it gives you a little more motivation
Amen.
to keep on going. So thanks for, depositing some great wisdom for us there.